Well, welcome everyone to our session. We're so happy to see you all here. This session is called An Innovative Approach to CHW Capacity Building, Sustaining the CHW Workforce Through Relationships and Resources. I'm Caitlin Klosterman. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm a CHW ally based out of Madison, Wisconsin. Yasmin?
Hi, I am Yasmin Aftahi. I'm the Envision Resource Coordinator, and I'm a CHW ally based in central Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Sarah Elise Bristol. I go by Essie. I'm a CHW. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am based in Bellevue, Nebraska.
All right. So before we dive into the content, we're just going to review the objectives for our session today. So we'll start out by providing a bit of a context about what CHW sustainability is and what challenges we face when we talk about CHW sustainability for the workforce. Then we will dive into a couple power building tools that we'll practice using in breakout rooms. And by the end of the session, you should be able to access a bunch of new resources to grow and sustain the CHW workforce through relationships and local and national initiative alignment. So who is Envision? Envision is a national CHW training and technical assistance center, and we were originally formed to support the CDC-funded CHWs for COVID response and Resilient Communities Initiative, and we'll refer to this as CCR. We're a collaboration of CHWs and allies from across the nation, and our team includes some founding members of the National Association of CHWs. And we work together to partner with CHWs, allies, and organizations from around the nation to elevate and sustain the CHW workforce. So before we dive in, I want to review a little bit about why sustainability is so challenging for the CHW workforce. First and foremost, the CHW workforce is in general a vulnerable workforce, right? This is one of the 6 pillars of CHWs that Notchwa released. CHWs are a precarious workforce, right? CHWs also lack resources and support, and in addition to the lack of resources, financial sustainability is challenging for the workforce, largely due to short-term program funding and major limitations for funding through Medicaid reimbursement. There are funding opportunities out there, but again, CHWs are oftentimes not leading the program design, which can result in fragmentation and retention issues. So how do we approach sustainability given these challenges? I'll pass to Essie to talk a little bit more about Envision's theory of change for sustaining the workforce.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. So Envision emphasizes 2 foundational strategies for sustaining the CHW workforce, and that's building relationships and aligning local and national efforts. This really leverages the intrinsic nature of why CHW work is so impactful and what CHWs do in their day-to-day, and it combines it with organizing principles and other CHW practices to increase CHW power and leadership. Envision's approach to capacity building through relationships is best illustrated in this model that we've developed. And at the very center, you'll see the very foundation to it all is growing CHW power. Power, simply put, is the ability to act or do stuff. And the key to sustainability is about strengthening our power, our capacity to make stuff happen, our capacity to influence decision makers or be the decision makers, to shape narrative and determine how resources are allocated. So this approach is really a cycle where you can start anywhere, and it's about starting with what you know. So since we know that CHW work is deeply relational, where CHWs have insights to community concerns and priorities, you might want to start on the right side of the triangle and create an inventory of the relationships that you currently have with individuals, organizations, networks, etc. Next comes the power analysis. This is where you might use a tool like a power map to plot out all the relationships from your inventory that you've just created to determine who has influence with decision makers and where you need to spend time building alliances. Then you will directly impact decision makers by strategically developing relationships and aligning interests. So through a combination of data, community stories, and one-to-one meetings where you are truly listening for what people care about and what issues they are focused on, you can then make a connection and find out where your interests and their interests intersect. This builds champions, leaders, and coalitions around the effort. Then, power is demonstrated by holding decision makers accountable. This is done through follow-ups, reviewing decision-making, and continuing to foster those relationships so that you are kept updated and know what's coming. And last, you evaluate and reflect on where things are at, how far things have moved, analyze that growth and power, and continue to build relationships to grow power, growing your ability to make change happen. So each point on the triangle really contributes to the broader CHW movement, amplifying CHW power and in turn, advancing CHW workforce sustainability. Now, it's essential to emphasize that without CHWs and CHW leadership, sustainability is compromised. We remember growing CHW power is really the foundation of our theory of change. In some cases, though, decisions about the workforce have been made without involving CHWs, which can hinder sustainability efforts. So to address this issue, the APHA, American Public Health Association, CHW section, created a policy on CHW self-determination, which states that at least half of any group making decisions about CHWs should be CHWs. That said, both CHWs and CHW allies play crucial roles in this work. That CHW self-determination policy really serves as the foundational building block of this model, which illustrates principles for partnerships between CHWs and allies. So with CHW leadership and representation, collaborative agreements can confidently be established on decision-making processes. And when addressing critical parameters such as the definition of CHWs, training standards, and other professional parameters, having CHWs at the table, or better yet, constructing the table, ensures that these decisions are made by and for CHWs. This in turn paves the way for the effective implementation of sustainability approaches that are both inclusive and reflective of the very unique contributions and impact that CHWs have on community health. And I'm going to pass it over back to Caitlin so that we can talk about what all this looks like in practice using Envision's CHW Sustainability Summit as an example. Caitlin, take it away.
Thanks, Essie. So in alignment with Envision's strategy for CHW sustainability, our team came up with a way to further align sustainability efforts and grow relationships across communities around the nation by holding a CHW Sustainability Summit. The summit focused on developing strategies for sustaining CHWs hired on CCR funding, but more than that, to contribute to the movement for CHW workforce equity and sustainability at large. The summit was an opportunity for all 67 CCR-funded communities to deepen relationships and grow CHW leadership and ally support by applying knowledge and skills with an in-person convening. The summit really prioritized peer-to-peer learning by encouraging communities and CHWs to present and share their experiences alongside subject matter experts from NACHWA, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, and other national CHW organizations. And of course, in the spirit of our theory of change that elevates and prioritizes CHW leadership, more than 50% of the attendees we ensured were CHWs. To complement the flow of this summit, Envision developed a participant guide and reflection journal to support capacity building and CHW leadership development as strategies for sustainability. I'll pass to Yasmin, who will dive into the process of developing this guide.
Thanks, Caitlin. So, in essence, with the Sustainability Summit, we really wanted to provide curriculum and training that supported more people to access the topics and curriculum of Envision's Community of Transformation, which is an 18-month cohort-based learning collaborative focused on CHW sustainability that several CCR teams were able to participate in. But we wanted to be able to expand our reach for some of that really important learning around sustainability. And so that was really the root of the summit. So if we think about everybody, 500 people coming from across the nation, island nations, tribal health departments, to come together and talk about sustainability, nobody's starting from zero. However, we may all be starting from a different place. And if we look at the summit as the analogy of building a house, so we're all coming together to build a house, and we have a tool belt full of tools to pursue that goal together. Different tools are in different tool belts, and we really wanted to support everybody to be able to show up and talk about the often complex topic of sustainability and feel supported and have the capacity to really get the most out of the summit as they could. And so with that, we held one-to-one conversations with each team that was attending the summit, so that we could learn more about where they're at and identify any gaps in their preparedness or foundational knowledge around sustainability. And when we collected all of that data and information, we really wanted to create a supportive resource that people could participate with and use before, during, and after the summit to support their learning and to be able to bring some context around the different pieces that we were going to be talking about, whether that's financial or programmatic sustainability topics. Therefore, we wanted to create the Sustainability Summit Participant Guide and Reflection Journal. And that was the main resource that came to everybody who attended the summit. So now we want to tell you a little bit more about the Participant Guide and Reflection Journal. So this is a toolkit developed by Envision that was provided to each summit participant and provided key framework around Envision's sustainability model and outlines of key national partners to align the national narrative around CHW sustainability. The toolkit is split into two sections that we're going to outline in this presentation. The first being sustainability foundations, and the other is national partner resources. It includes curriculum and worksheets that are designed to support readers to think about sustainability from the perspective of CHW leadership and relationships. We want to emphasize that this tool is not just for the summit. It's a specific example we're using to talk about Envision's resource provision as a capacity building method, but it's really designed to give a bird's eye view of Envision's theory of change and sustainability curriculum for all CHW programs who are looking towards sustainability. That's why we released it publicly in both English and Spanish. It mirrors what the next steps for Envision will be in this exciting next few years of supporting the sustainability of programs and the capacity of programs towards financial sustainability and CHW integration. So, before I pass it off to Essie to dive into some more curriculum pieces, I want to introduce that part one of the guidebook is CHW sustainability. So this half of the guidebook was adapted from the Community of Transformation curriculum that Envision hosted. It was an 18-month cohort-based learning collaborative around CHW sustainability. And so we really dove deep over 18 months around what sustainability looks like from our theory of change that we shared. And so we were able to pull some really important pieces from that curriculum and distill it down to a supportive context that would be useful for anybody who is really thinking more deeply about CHW sustainability. And so it emphasizes the importance of building CHW capacity and elevating CHW leadership through relationship building as the foundation of CHW workforce sustainability. The tools incorporated in this half of the guidebook were chosen based on identified gaps of prospective attendees and foundational knowledge required for maximum participation during the summit. So I'm going to pass it on to Essie to walk through more of those pieces that are in this half of the guidebook and highlight some key components from the guidebook curriculum.
Thank you, Yasmin. Hey, folks who are still joining us. Okay, so we now know what needs to happen at the root of our sustainability efforts. If there's one thing we walk away from this session knowing, it's the power of relationships, and that CHW capacity building and power needs to be at the foundation of it, right? So please, we're going to ask it a bunch, put it in the chat, let's celebrate it, and let's go out and tell it to all the world. But how do we do that, right? We heard about what it looked like in practice at the CHW Sustainability Summit, and then we learned more from Yasmin about the Summit Participant Guide and Reflection Journal and how that served to build capacity for Summit attendees. So now we're going to review together some of those power building principles and practice using tools from part 1 of the journal that we shared with the Summit participants. Okay, we know we have to grow CHW power. How do we strengthen the ability for CHWs to make change happen? How do we grow our power? So we can strengthen our capacity to act. We can build CHW power through people, narrative, and resources, the 3 spheres you see there on the screen. CHWs can directly impact decision makers, people, by developing relationships and aligning interests. CHWs have a shared story, a narrative of deeply held cultural perspectives that come from shared experiences, values, beliefs, and culture that we share with those in our communities, those that we serve. And we can align that narrative to build public understanding and support so that CHWs can then influence the way that resources, like funding, are distributed, especially if the people's interests and narrative are aligned. So in short, we make change happen by influencing people, narrative, and resources. And we do this by building relationships. And my cat says hi for anyone who can hear that. So expanding and deepening our relationships, it's an accessible and limitless source for growing CHW power. CHWs demonstrate this power in the communities that we live in and serve daily. We cultivate and sustain trust through meaningful engagement strategies. We bond over shared experiences with our clients, with the people we serve. We stay in touch with them regularly. We visit them in their homes. We connect people, their individuals and their families to the resources that they need, and we adapt to the changing priorities of what they need, of what our community needs. CHWs and CHW allies can apply this same impactful approach to relationship building to achieve sustainable CHW programs. So what we're going to do next is our first activity. We're going to take 1 to 2 minutes to do a self-reflection. You're going to open up to page 11 of the guidebook that's going to be dropped in the chat for you all. And you can either grab a piece of paper if you like to write on paper, or you can open up a Word document and start to make some notes. We're going to do a self-reflection for about 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes. And then we're going to get out into some random small groups just to talk about who are you in relationship with. Take a minute to think about who you're in relationship with. How did you establish those relationships? And then really importantly, what we're going to talk about in those breakout groups, how do your relationships enable you to do CHW work or enable you to be that authentic CHW ally and do CHW allyship work? Okay, then we're going to take some time to share out and hear from a couple of you what that looks like. So again, you're going to take a minute right now. We'll play some music. All right, take a minute. We'll let y'all know, and then we'll put you into some random small groups so that you can talk with other folks about the relationships that you have. Please put into the chat, y'all, anything that came up or how your relationships enable you to do CHW work. And I'd love to hear from one CHW quickly before we move on. Do we have anyone who's willing to share? Who's brave? Who's feeling brave? Thanks so much for sharing that. And good to hear y'all didn't hear my dog barking. She's really passionate about CHW relationships, okay, y'all? All right. So please continue to put in the chat ways that your relationships enable you to do CHW work. And let's take a minute to think based on the conversations that we had, because this is really just the beginning of us thinking about this, right? And some of you have probably thought about this a million times already. But what power do you already have to advance CHW sustainability? Thinking about the way that our relationships really enable us to do CHW work. We just got to hear about some of those amazing reflections. So with that in mind, what power do you have to advance CHW sustainability? And spoiler alert, you all already have power. Every single person here. No one is starting from zero because of the relationships that you have. We know that the more people that care about an issue, the more power we have to make change happen, right? So you just started listing out some of those relationships, and pretty soon we're going to get a chance to flex that muscle even more and build relationships deeper with other folks here at this session. And Caitlin's going to introduce that to us next. Caitlin?
Thanks, Essie. So let's say it again for the people in the back. Relationships are an exponential and limitless source of power, all right? The more people that care about something, the more power, capacity, and resources we have to make change happen, which is why building relationships and getting to know folks in your local, state, national is so important. So based in years of community organizing experience and research, what we know is that people are motivated by self-interest. Self-interest is your concern for your priorities and those of the people that are connected to you. Relationships build power through shared self-interest. So when more than one person cares about something, there's more attention and greater energy being given to that interest. How do you determine shared interests to align the collective priorities of your community? We're doing it through one-to-ones. We're building relationships by holding intentional one-to-one conversations between two people to understand a person's story, their needs, their concerns about their community. And we can relate those stories back to our own self-interest. And if you want to read more about what you see on the slide now, pages 16 and 17 of the guidebook provide a really good framework about self and community interest. All right, so let's practice it. We're gonna do some one-to-ones in this session. We just thought about our own self-interest in regards to our CHW work and the previous activity. So keep those things in mind while we're having conversations in these breakouts. And just a reminder before we get into breakouts, the purpose of this exercise is purely to learn and practice together. So the stakes are low. We're just having casual one-to-one conversations. We're listening to our partner's story and hearing about why they do the work that they do. All right, so we're gonna put together some two-person breakout rooms. And then for 5 minutes of that time, we'll have one person ask questions and the other person tell their story about what they care about and why they do the work that they do. And then at that 5-minute mark, we'll do a little announcement and we'll switch roles. So we'll spend about 10 minutes total in these rooms. All right. While Essie sets up those rooms, what questions does anybody have before we dive in?
It's just an exercise, or are we writing down answers, or like, recording any of this? Sorry.
Just an exercise. We're just having our one-to-one conversations. If you want to take notes or like write down the contact info for your partner, page 20 of the guidebook is an excellent place to do that. Any other questions? All right. Well then, Essie, you can go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Hey y'all. Everyone's trickling back in. Looks like we've got most folks. I hope you had a great time in your one-to-one. Those are so fun. We are going to skip a verbal reflection, but I want to hear from y'all in the chat. What went well in your one-to-one? And what created discomfort? And how did it feel to be heard by your partner? Also, feel free to share any fun connections or shared interests that y'all made. Folks, continue to put those things in the chat, and we're gonna move on with our. So, now that we practiced some of those capacity building tools that you can find in part 1 of the guidebook, I'm gonna pass it off to Yasmin, who's gonna talk a little bit more about what part 2 of the guidebook entails.
Thanks, Caitlin. And yeah, I would definitely love to keep reading the chat and hear how those conversations went. Thank you so much. I hope it was fun for you. I usually get so much joy out of the one-to-ones. So I wanted to quickly go over part 2 of the guidebook. So I talked about this a little bit before at the beginning of the presentation, but we kind of realized that I wish I could see your hands raised. You can use your emoji, but like, how many of you hear a million acronyms every single day and just have to try to make sense of it all? Who is APHA, NMPHI, NACHWA, ASTO? Like, just yes, Erin. So it's complicated. So we realized that if I could take some time, our team could take some time, do that research for you and distill it down into some really nice overviews, then it might just support your ability to get connected to the national work, which is so important. Even if you're working at the local level, knowing and being connected to the national work is so important and trickles down to communities. I think everyone in this room knows that because we're all NACHWA members. But so we have overviews of 13 national partner organizations, who they are, what they do, why it matters to the CHW workforce, and key resources. So it's just a really great starter pack for getting connected to national work. Or let's say you are in relationship with an organization or a decision maker who is new to the CHW workforce, and you'd like some support in kind of guiding them to understand who CHWs are and the role that they play. This is a great resource that you can hand to them to do their own research and reading. So we really hope that you get a lot of value from that resource. And so that is the second part of the guidebook. There are CHW focused organizations and CHW ally organizations. So what that means is there are organizations that are not solely working within the CHW field, but are doing a lot of tangential work that is very important, like in policy or things like that. And then there's also like the C3 Core Consensus Project, the CHW Center for Research and Evaluation, that are more CHW focused organizations. So there's a really diverse group, and we'd love to hear how you are finding that useful in your work. So today, or through the process of creating this guidebook, we as a team learned some really valuable lessons. Some of those are that CHW leadership is foundational to achieving sustainability and can't be emphasized enough. Leadership development and capacity building is an integral part of walking the walk, and allies play an important role in creating supportive spaces for that to happen. Balancing state and community level work with national work can be challenging, but it's all connected. We can support state and local health departments and organizations to get connected to national work while also supporting the specific challenges that they are facing in their local communities. And also supporting people to use resources effectively is really important. It's not enough to just provide people with resources, but it's imperative that we also provide context and support for how to apply those resources to the work that people are doing. And that could be through group coaching, peer-to-peer coaching, connections, and just really supporting with lots of great context about what resources are. Can we go next slide, please? So we're a little bit running out of time, which is why I'm going a little bit fast, but I really want to recap what we've learned today. And Essie, actually, do you want to take over the recap?
Sure, happy to. So with the takeaways and next steps, what did we talk about today, right? That CHW leadership and building capacity for CHWs is the foundation of all of the sustainability work. Nothing about us without us. CHW should be the ones leading, and our voices should be the loudest in this work. Okay? What else did we do? We learned about the power of relationships. We learned about how much power we all already have by starting to list out an inventory of the relationships that we have and thinking about how they enable us to do CHW work. We learned about how our self-interest and then aligning with other folks, seeing what we care about and combining it with what other folks care about builds more power, because the more people we have caring about something, the more power we have to make change happen, which is part of why those building relationship skills are so key. So we practiced doing some one-to-ones and learning about each other and seeing what we have in similarities with other folks and how we can connect or what we learn. We practiced even in 10 minutes really learning about people. I mean, that was 10 minutes in a room, and so many folks said, I learned so much in that short time, or I really connected with this person. So thinking about how powerful it is to really connect and listen to folks. And then aligning with national narrative with the resources Yasmin just showed us, and you all can take some time to look through the participant journal and resource. That guidebook has at the whole second half of it descriptions of all the acronyms, like Yasmin was saying, of national partners and how we can learn about what they do and how we can connect and build relationships with them to help put that foundation for our sustainability work, because we're all here to unite and to work together. So what can we do? What can we learn from national partners? And how can we stay connected to the work? How can we know what's going on so that we can bring those best practices back to our communities and continue to advocate for CHW sustainability?
Thanks, Essie. So, looking forward, what's next for Envision? We're really happy that we're going to continue our work. The next year is going to look a little bit different. Our goal is really to expand outreach where we can by supporting the CCR 2109 recipients who are receiving no-cost extensions, but also supporting state, tribal, local, and territorial health departments through different capacity building, coaching, and resource provision. We're working to develop resources such as expanding what's in this toolkit and also supporting a financial sustainability toolkit. As we work to develop resources that support local health departments as well, we're able to get a little bit more specific. For example, working on a CHW integration toolkit for local health departments in the state of Wisconsin. So lots of really exciting resources that we are working on together as a collective. And also, we are going to talk a little bit about myenvision. myenvision, we actually launched more than a year ago, and it's our virtual space. It's really a virtual space that's a continuation of the work Envision's doing. So it's everybody can get connected from all over the country with CHWs and CHW allies to share resources and best practices and really get connected with Envision and all of this amazing coaching that we do, capacity building that we do, resource provision. That's really where you can get in touch with us to continue talking and learning through topics such as what we went over today. So we're going to put a link in the chat momentarily where you can go sign up for that. We'd love to see you there. Would also love to see in the chat if anybody's already part of myenvision. We'd love to hear from you and what your favorite thing about it is. We are also going to strengthen our relationships, continue strengthening our relationships with national partners to align the national narrative around CHW sustainability. which is so important as we think about lots of different policy work that's happening. So we're very excited about the next years of our work. And finally, last but certainly not least, we wanted to make sure you knew about some of our great resources, some of which we've already talked about. Envision has an extensive resource library full of really intentional CHW vetted resources. They're part of many different categories such as sustainability, COVID-19, population-specific resources, lots of different modalities to match your learning style, whether that's a webinar or a toolkit or a podcast. So it's a really amazing resource library we worked very hard on. So please go explore it, find resources that you want to use in your work and share it with partners. Also, we talked a lot about the Sustainability Summit today, and we wanted to make sure that you all knew that you could access plenary sessions and keynotes from the summit, video recordings in English and Spanish on the Envision website. This includes an amazing keynote by Denise Octavia Smith, who you've heard from a lot through the NACHWA conference this year, the executive director of NACHWA, and she did an incredible keynote speech, so you can go and watch that. And there's also a great example of North Carolina Community Health Worker Association working with the state health department to collaborate on a sustainability plan, and you can hear that story. So lots of amazing examples coming out of the summit that are available to you now. And obviously the summit guidebook in English and Spanish. We'll post the link in the chat again, but please go download that, share it with the people that you work with, do the worksheets, and we would love to hear from you about how that's going and answer any questions that you have. So we'll make sure that you have our contact information below as well. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we're going to have a QR code momentarily to go check into myenvision, and we'd love to see you there. Let's chat about how NACHWA is going, what we learned. Essie, Caitlin, and I can go in there and answer any burning questions you might have coming out of this session that we weren't able to answer. So we'll see you there in the virtual world and during the NACHWA conference. So thank you again.